What's up, guys? Today we are going to be revisiting my duality analysis. I started this in 2020, and I'm not gonna lie, when I was writing this, I was definitely in a place. So I've been putting it off for a little bit because I've been a bit intimidated to go back because I definitely took a deep dive with this album and inspired to revisit it because yesterday we were in the Seeking Blue server and we were able to listen to the commentary with the album as a party, so it's kind of cool. I guess this is just like a shameless promotion, not paid to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. If you are looking for a cool place to connect with artists and go to different events, I'm going to put a link to the Seeking Blue server in the description below. I'm on there, we have lots of cool artists in there, and there's events going on all the time, so please join us if you're interested in that type of thing. Well, this is going to be part one. I don't know how many parts there will be yet, but welcome to my analysis. This is a new series on duality, which I tend to really enjoy. I have this hoodie and everything. It's a pretty cool hoodie. I can probably link that as well if there are any left, which I think there are. The reason I was drawn to this album, the concept of duality is something that I've written about quite often, and because the album is called Duality, it really drew my attention to it because I really wanted to figure out what exactly was going on here. They have a preview of the album that they released where they talk about how half of the album is melodic and the other half is heavy. So then it kind of creates a duality because there are the two different halves of the album. This is like an exploration of self and understanding and accepting all elements of self and all different portions of who we are. And at first it may be very easy to see our bad habits and our negative pieces of self, but as we reframe them, we can see that even within our negative aspects, there's actually a positive we can pair to that. And that's making sure that we can see that both parts are necessary for who we are. And if we don't have that element of self, then we're really doing ourselves a disservice. We just need to figure out how to apply that part of self in a way that makes sense for our lives. Now, when I was looking at this and looking through the track list, I put both sides of the track list together, and I realized that, like, at least the way my brain was looking at it, this may have not been intentional. If you go from the interlude and then go all the way through, it seemed like each track, as you line them up, was like the opposite of each other, but within that, they were like teaching the same lesson. So there are 3 acts within the introduction of the pacing. I was trying to figure out the best format to put this in, but there's just so much here. And yeah, it's a bit chaotic, so bear with me. The whole reason that I've broken it into acts is because I think that there's a duality to the messages within the tracks. So if we look at them, I know it says duality, but you can almost get more than just 2 meanings out of it. You can look at it multiple ways. That's kind of what I think of when it's duality. It's not necessarily always 2. For these acts, each act explains a different view of what's happening within the album. Act 1, we start with an external situation between 2 partners. And the first half of the album, the melodic half, is the story of like a point of view of one party in this relationship. And the second half is like the heavy part of the album, and that's told from another party of the relationship. For this context, I chose like melodic to be female and heavy to be male. Of course, that's not always the case in any of these scenarios we go through within these songs. It's just for ease. For this act of the album, it's meant to be played in order. I listened to like the full female story and then took notes and then listened to the male story and then took notes. And then as I was like combining my notes, I realized that there was a lot of like duality between what was happening on both sides of that album. And I realized that they were like both expressing their own experiences with a very similar situation. It's like one side versus the other. And then in Act 2, it'll be a reflection of both of those stories combined to paint a picture of the entire relationship. In order to listen to it the second time, we have to like rearrange the tracks. I'll post a screenshot of like the order that I listened to them in for Act 2. And then as we combine the tracks together, that's what creates Act 2. So in the combined external story, there are 6 parts, and each part contains a song from the point of view of each partner. The order of the heavy and melodic shifts to better illustrate the story, and each partner represents like a polar opposite point of view that becomes relevant in Act 3. In this story, we're trying to find a balance between like logic and emotion. So a lot of the times you'll see like one party is very much in emotion mind and the other one's like logic mind. And I'm gonna briefly talk about Act 3, but Act 3 will be in the next video. In Act 3, we realize that we must turn inward. So every external problem that's outlined in the previous story was ultimately caused by the partners not doing enough internal work. So if they combine what happened, they can find answers to how they could solve the issues that were being outlined in the tracks themselves. A lot of the times with relationships, we're very much looking to blame the other partner and not look at ourselves. But a lot of the times, it's actually both parties. And if both parties don't try to learn from what happened, then neither of them are gonna grow, and there needs to be a combined understanding that this wasn't all your fault, but that doesn't mean you didn't do something wrong. It's realizing that there's duality to that. I can do something wrong, but I also am not responsible for everything that happened. I'm responsible for my actions, and that partner is responsible for their actions. So the moral of Act 2 that's outlined is going to be to turn inward to evaluate ourselves, and we can do this by combining both stories and comparing them track by track, side by side. By doing this, we see how each pairing has one polar extreme of the same problem. Ultimately, by combining the tracks, we can see that each side of the failed relationship lacked the internal balance. That lack of internal balance was caused by both parties and caused them to be unfit in that relationship. As listeners, this act teaches us the value in balancing conflicting aspects of self. We must not allow ourselves to be swayed to one side of self, because we need to balance those sides in order to be the best version of self. We're gonna get right into Act 2. Just a reminder that these are all overviews. So after Act 3, the plan is to go in and do a deep dive of each of these parts, which will also be a deep dive of each track, similar to what I've done in the past. So we're gonna get into part 1, which is Broken and Echoes. From the female perspective, their mind is at I entered a relationship and it's getting rocky. I let them know that I put down all my walls for them, and I feel like they don't love me anymore. I try to ask them if they still love me. She's not seeing that letting down all of the walls was an issue, and she's blaming it on the other party. So she was in control of taking down those walls, but she's blaming the other party for not responding to them being down, instead of checking self to see what was the purpose of bringing them all down. And then when we go to Echoes, the male is in a headspace where it's I'm trying to leave this relationship, it's not working for us, but I think if I keep pushing through it and keep my emotions in check, I can just keep going. As you're pushing through it, this person is in a space where they can't help but imagine a world without their partner, and realizing that their relationship's holding them back. And it's getting to a space where maybe if they realize how bad this is, then I don't have to do it. So I'm just gonna keep going and hope that they notice. So the problem here is this person won't let himself act on his emotions and leave. He views this as that's the thing that's keeping him from happiness. So if he leaves it, then all of his stress is gonna disappear. But at the same time, it's if I just do this, it'll disappear. But that's the easy route. I'm just gonna keep going. And then it's also maybe they'll notice, and then that'll be their problem. I'm just gonna keep pushing through, but I'm not a quitter, so I'm gonna keep doing it. And if they wanna end it, then that's their choice, but we're gonna just keep powering through. So within this example, there are two different extremes. So one of them is my emotions control me, and then the other one's I control my emotions. We'll explain that a bit more within Act 3, what the polar extremes are, but I'm just outlining it here. Now we're gonna get into part 2, Don't Know Why and Eternal. So within this part, the female is I let him through all of my walls, and now I feel hurt by him, so I'm gonna push him away. If we're following the story, the problem here is that the moment that this person feels hurt, she pushes the other person away because she doesn't know how to tolerate that pain, and she can't tell where the source of pain is coming from, because all of the pain is the same. And then with the male, we've kind of progressed from this place of feeling this relationship's over and getting to a place of we're just gonna power through anyway. We understand that this is how we feel, but if we fight hard enough, then we'll be able to overcome it. And I'm gonna let her know that I'm gonna fight for it, but I don't trust that they're at the same level as me. So we go from this place of hoping that our partner ends the relationship to a place of no, I'm gonna fight for it, but I don't think that they're on board. And the problem here is he's worried about the other party's contributions, and he's already going into it assuming that the other partner is not going to match the efforts. He's more concerned about saving the relationship for his pride versus looking at if the relationship is even worth saving. So the two polar extremes here are, I have no idea why I did this, I planned out exactly what to do. And then we get to part 3, Heart of Mine / Running Back to You. So in this side, the male side, it's Heart of Mine, and they're convinced that this will work out. They're holding on to the good memories as proof that they can get through this, and they're gonna fight no matter what's thrown at them. And the problem here was that he was latched to the memories instead of what is actually happening. He's ignoring what he truly feels and ignoring what's happening in that moment out of the need to fulfill the goal of saving the relationship, and there's no boundaries there. it's just, we've set our mind to this and we're gonna do it regardless of how much it hurts us. Running back to you, I can go back to him because I realized that even if being with him hurts, being in this relationship made me feel things. And even though there's like this knowledge somewhere in there that it's toxic, that's almost like part of why they like it. And there's like even this like malicious getting a partner upset so that they can feel feelings, so that they can feel it, because they thrive off of this drama and this feeling. And the problem here is that she goes back to a harmful relationship because that's how she feels things. They go back to the relationship as a way to harm themselves and feel negative emotions, which they basically get addicted to. They're addicted to this feeling of hurting themselves through all this drama, through all this pain that they're causing to themselves and their partner. The polar extremes here are I let facts tell me what is right, and the other one's like I let emotions tell me what is right. And then we get into poison/nothing. Here we have the male first, which is poison. And like for this part, the male is in a space where it's like, I realize that the other person hasn't changed and that I need to leave them. I'm understanding that they are toxic to me. And then here, the problem is that he's failing to understand how he got there in the first place. His failure to let go earlier, when he first wanted to, ended up hurting him more in the long run. He's refusing to acknowledge that aspect of toxic patterns. And then like on the female side, the female kind of says, this obviously meant nothing to you. I need to confront him about that because how did he not feel anything? So in that aspect, it's like ignoring the own contributions you've had and ignoring the times where that's not true, that there wasn't nothing. There's artificial value. And then these are the polar extremes of like, I meant everything to them and I meant nothing to them. Part 5 is nightmares and animals. So with nightmares, the male's point of view is like she comes at them when they're breaking up and is accusing them of feeling nothing in the relationship. At first they're afraid that they're gonna fall into the cycle again. He's like afraid that she won't be able to survive without him. But it's basically at the point where it's like, I need to tell her what she's doing wrong and I need to do it to become stronger. And the problem with this is the thought of having her there in his life is like nearly immobilizing, specifically because it wasn't in line with future goals. And he's blaming her for the cycle without acknowledging his own contributions to that cycle. And he's acting out of fear right now. Female's point of view is like, he is angry because I accused him of feeling nothing. And the female's like, I'm just gonna tell him that I can't change anything because this is just how I am. It's only natural, this is the way I am. And the problem here is that she lacks the retrospective to evaluate herself and her actions, and I'm not gonna grow, I'm just gonna be like this. And then the combined lesson here is, this is who I must be, and this is just the way I am. And then the last part, so with sad story, the female's in a place where it's like, how could he do this to me? Who am I without this relationship? Can't live with this. He must take me back. And the problem here is that she doesn't feel in control because of the loss of her relationship. And she fails to see like her own actions. She just thinks that she's not in control of anything. And this is all something that's happening to her, but she can't fix anything. And she doesn't really know who she is without him. A resistance to her and realizing that you need to go about life resisting this. There's nothing really left to say. It's time to move on. We're just gonna resist this situation and focus on self. That's good that there's resistance, but there's also like an element of like, you can't just ignore it and you need to like look at what you learned from it. If you don't like sit with it for a bit and analyze like the events that happened, you're not gonna be able to learn, so you're not gonna be able to actually approach your goals from the right mindset. So the two polar opposites here are I have no control over my future, and the other one's I write my own story. If you're at all confused, because I know this is a lot, feel free to put any questions in the comments and I'll make sure that I can revisit different elements that may be confusing. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and we'll see you for Act 3, Part 2. See ya!